أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يوصيكم الله في أولادكم للذكر مثل حظ الأنثيين فإن كن نساء فوق اثنتين فلهن الثلثا ما ترك وإن كانت واحدة فلها النصف ولأبويه لكل واحد منهما السدس مما ترك إن كان له ولد فإن لم يكن له ولد وورثه أبواه فلأمه الثلث فإن كان له إخوة فلأمه السدس من بعد وصية يوصي بها أو دين آباؤكم وأبناؤكم لا تدرون أيهم أقرب لكم نفعا فريضة من الله إن الله كان عليما حكيما. इस आयत पर कल दर्स जारी था कि वक्त खत्म हो गया.
This is verse 12 of chapter 4. Huzur is saying that we were talking about this verse, discussing this verse when the time ended. Huzur is saying that Huzur is saying that he was speaking of the definition of certain verses. For instance, Huzur is saying that I was discussing what wasiyat means. It means a command, and as far as the application of that is concerned, it's not essential that this application should be the responsibility of the society. Sometimes the right is given, but it's given separately. But by itself, should not be regarded. It's not proven that a wasiyat or a command should be enforced. In the book, this is sometimes given. This right is sometimes given, but not everywhere. The word kitab is a very important word, and people, the jurisprudence scholars have used it as a term which denotes the most important obligation, from which nothing is more important. And then the other word is farizatun min Allah, that's something which is an obligation from Allah. This is another stage of it, and the word wajib is also used for something which is incumbent or which is essential. But all of these terms are side issues which is encompassed by the word kitab. The word kitab is extremely vast, and it is used for anything that is a book from Allah, through which any prophet who is sent by Allah is given a law such as that given to the Holy Prophet ﷺ for the whole world. And in this regard, the kitab is an obligation towards payable to Allah, or fulfilling, that it needs to be fulfilled for the sake of Allah. But it is not it is not the right of the society or people to enforce it. So the whole of the Sharia of Islam is a kitab. It's the most well established kitab, but the same kitab does not permit anyone, does not give anyone the right to enforce it or to compel anyone. And then the word kitab is used with regards to certain obligations, but no one has been given the right to enforce them, and neither has this ever been done, and neither can it be done at under any circumstances. Kutiba alaykum as-siyam, that it says that fasting has been made obligatory upon you. So this is the most firm of obligations, but there is no tradition which says that a person that Huzur is saying that no one has ever forced someone to fast and kept them in solitary confinement to make sure they don't get any food or drink. Huzur is saying that man has not the power to enforce certain things. So the word kitab, although it is used, it has a very strong meaning in terms of obligation, but its usage proves that the right of punishment is separate, and some under the word kitab, there are some rights of punishment have been given, but because they have been given, therefore man has the obligation, and it's not automatically derived from the word kitab. The obligation of kitab in kitab compared to the word wasiyat is that wasiyat is generally used, it does not have to do with the revelation of the law, but the word kitab has to do with the revelation of the law. So it is an obligation in the sense that every human being who is in that circle and who is encompassed by that, the word kitab means that all those people who are within that circle, for them they are obliged to follow it. And kitab also includes extra prayers and other voluntary teachings. So, and anyone will be regarded as a true righteous person if he acts on voluntary and obligatory instructions, and in combination his obedience, levels of obedience will be set by Allah. So the imams who are under this title, they are separate. Allah says, "For man yuti Allah wa Rasula and ulaika allazina mal." Sorry, Mr. Rest of the verse. Huzur is saying that even if one can never ascertain as to how deep and how sincere somebody's obedience was, but the obligation was performed. So someone acted in accordance with something, then his obligation was fulfilled. Because otherwise, we cannot say use the word "one man yutillah" will not apply at all, because "man yutillah wa Rasul" means that people they obeyed Allah and the Prophet. And people think that everyone has obeyed and that's it, but there are some aspects of ta'at or obedience which no one can ever see, that is deep within. There is some kind of types of obligations. For example, there could be voluntary acts or extra acts that one performs, and no one can know how deeply he did it, or with what depth of sincerity he performed that act. For example, he was saying that an Arab came to the Holy Prophet ﷺ, a Bedouin, and he said to the Holy Prophet ﷺ that tell me something minimum that I can perform, and so that I'm not under any so I do not have to do anything extra, and what is the minimum for me. The Holy Prophet ﷺ told him that he said to the Holy Prophet ﷺ that tell me something fundamental. So the Holy Prophet ﷺ told him the fundamentals of Islam, and he said, okay, this is what I would act on, and that's it. And the Holy Prophet ﷺ said, if you do that, then you'll be fine. So the one form of kitab includes although it includes extra prayers for the purpose of acting upon them, but if according to people's own limitations, if some of the parts of it are left, then it doesn't matter. As I was saying, in this regard, the word kitab means that people in some places people do not have the right to interfere in between individuals and Allah's matters, but in some places he has given the right. Huzur is saying that I was thinking afterwards that the word wasiyat has been used in the Holy Quran, where Allah has given a man the right to punish, but when I reflected, I realized that right has been given by a separate verse and not it doesn't come under the word wasiyat. For example, with respect to murder, the word wasiyat is used as asking if this is in any verse. So they're saying that reminding of the verse. Zul is saying that taking life or the instruction not to take life also has the word of wasiyat. Huzur is saying that I didn't get a chance to search for the actual verse, but I remembered that there was that there is the word wasiyat includes some such punishments that have been the right the society has been given the right to mete out. So from this we can judge that the word kitabat or obligations or wasiyat, as far as man's interference is concerned, man's right of interference is concerned, is not as a result of the usage of any of these words about anything. It comes as a result of when Allah has specifically separately given that right, such as in the teaching of limitations, the punishment of a thief is mentioned. That is a separate right given in a separate verse. Otherwise, the whole kitab is the highest word to use about obligations. And in the same book, it is also said, La ikraha fid din, that it is an obligation on all, but there can be no compulsion. So where can there be no compulsion? This is then afterwards there are different sorts of this. If someone does not accept a law, then that cannot be applied to someone forcibly, or this is Allah's work, and Allah saying that He doesn't want to do. He's not doing it. Allah says He's made a law, and now He's let people believe or not believe. It's up to them. So Allah has not Himself taken this law into His own hands. He's left it to people, given them the choice to follow or not to follow. So those who accept the Sharia, then after them, for them the application of Sharia, then there's ikrah as well, compulsion. So, and those are such compulsions where there is a punishment that is required, and then there's further portions of that. There are some punishments, some sins about which people have still not yet decided whether they can be applied to the non-Muslims or not, and about some there is according to a universal principle, everyone thinks that naturally these are worthy of being, they must be enforced. For example, killing someone or usurping someone's right or stealing. About these, it is known that punishment should be given. And what the punishment should be, there is a disagreement in that, but there is international understanding that man has been granted. This is that capability of speech which man has been, the quality that man has been given, it's been embedded in human nature, and with regards to that internal edict, one has a right to enforce certain things. And so in this regard, a proper law system should be used, where the Sharia of Islam's aspects of law, where punishments are due to people's mistakes and a result of people's not performing the rites properly. So it's not according those people who don't accept the Quran. You cannot enforce the punishment or the type of punishment, and unless the country, if it's a democratic country and without reference to the Sharia, where the majorities of those people whose ideas, whose minds or whose thoughts have been nourished by the Holy Quran, they themselves democratically they can make such decisions which are exactly in accordance with the enforcement of the Sharia. So there is no need for any separate system of Sharia law. and it's not mentioned in the Holy Quran anywhere. The Holy Quran has only given the only principle of government is to govern with justice. So if you're going to make a law, make sure it's with justice, and if you do so, then there'll be no difference. You will not be able to distinguish between a Muslim and a Muslim. You will not be able to distinguish between the rights of one country person and another one. So if some people desire that the Sharia should be enforced, then they cannot enforce the Sharia more than the Sharia has permitted people to enforce it. The Sharia is saying that Sharia means that it's a law, and Allah is saying that you should act upon it because you have to present it to God. But where punishments are concerned, the same Sharia also says to you, La ikraha fi din, there is no you cannot enforce or compel anyone to perform in any particular way. According to the Sharia, Huzur is saying that. So what's the answer then? Allah says that the word uses the word adl, or the justice, and it prevails over all of this issue. So Allah, you can't say that you can't say that one Muslims will be treated in this way and non-Muslims will be treated in this way. That is not that's not justice. As we're saying, justice is such an incredible principle that its acts will fall on any other thing which goes wrong. So anything that clashes with the justice, then the justice will prevail, and all other lesser manners will be crushed into pieces. So if this is the way this is implemented, and then such a law can be implemented in an Islamic society, and that would be fair and just. And as far as the Sharia is concerned, Allah is making an obligation. Who is stopping you from offering your salat, and who is stopping you from speaking the truth in courts, and who is stopping you from usurping children's rights, and who is stopping you from going and doing lewd acts, or to stop yourself from doing lewd acts? All of these things are the subjects of the kitab, and there is no need for it's not necessarily need to have a law of the country. Allah is saying that get started. Why are the Maulvis waiting? What are they waiting? That only when the government of Pakistan says they will listen to the Holy Quran. The Quran is well established. So from this, the Maulvis are afraid, because this is hard work. The Holy Prophet ﷺ, he said he worked hard in establishing the book, the kitab, and he told those people to do it who voluntarily wanted to be a part of that kitab, and for them there is no need to have a law apply to them. There was no law enforced either in his time or in the time of the blessed caliphs, and they themselves worked in accordance to the finest points of that law. Voluntarily. But as far as the limits are concerned, the Sharia has been revealed, and when these verses were revealed, and as they were revealed, then the law of nature, law of the Sharia kept being enforced on those people who voluntarily accepted it. And when all of it was revealed, then that verse was revealed, Al-yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum wa atmamtu alaykum ni'mati wa raditu lakum al-islam adina. That today, that's what the Holy Prophet ﷺ said in the last sermon. He said that today I have completed your religion for you, and the favor of Islam is completed on you, etc. So Huzur saying this Sharia has come And it's been around for 1400 years, and yet these people don't understand that it has come. Who is stopping you? Who is asking, will you perform your salat when somebody beats you with sticks? Will you only fast if you are confined in a room and you are not going to be given a single drop of water? Will you stop yourself from usurping people's rights if you get beaten up with the shoes? Huzur is saying that what kind of Sharia is that? Because Sharia is saying that there is no compulsion in religion. Where compulsion is used, the Sharia is gone out the window. So why are you making plans of throwing the Sharia out of the earth? If you cannot be applied, then you have to work hard to make sure it gets applied, and for that you will have to go to people's homes and you have to knock on their doors and you have to say this is the Sharia law and this is how you should act in accordance with this, instead of making laws and you struggle, as a result of which the power should be transferred to you. Then if in that case the Sharia that is enforced will be wrong, and in that case you'll be taking the rights of God in your hand, Godhead in your hand, and you will be doing more than democracy. And because democracy says that whenever man goes away from normal justice, he is worthy of censure, because the justice is not something which is doubtful and is not known to some people and known to some people. In general, in the clear matters, it is justice something which is understood. It is something in which there is nothing, no ups and downs. But in the finer details, that is something else. But as far as mainstream justice is concerned, whenever those ulama who wish to enforce the Sharia, they give their own edicts, and which other Muslims can disagree with. They are also acting on Sharia, who understand this Sharia in one way, and these others are considering Sharia to mean something else. So when they take their law into their own hands, then they'll have their understanding will have the upper hand, and then through law they will regard the Sharia to be the one, and they will transgress, and they will enforce people to apply edicts against their understanding and their desires. And the coming people might curse them and say that you shed blood for nothing, and they might disagree with them. So you will not only will you not be able to be just to the non-Muslim, you will also be unjust to your own people. And Huzur saying that we have seen this in history. Some kings, Muslim kings, the Banu Umayyads, Huzur saying I think he was the last king of Umayyad dynasty, or perhaps Harun and Mamun, who were Abbasi kings, Hamun al-Rashid and Mamun al-Rashid. This occurred. This discussion was taken up at that time, and the decision was made at one point that to regard the Quran as being a creation is such a big crime that as a result of that, and there was a command that people should be killed, and you should kill these people and you should burn their houses and destroy them. They have no right to live who regard the Quran as being a creation. Huzur is saying that which word of the Kitab in the book from which was their guide, so they had their own idea of God, of the creation of God, and they regarded that as being such a mainstay of the religion, that they thought that if we don't do it, then they'll lose the right to live. So they hit people and they burned them, loads of people. And in the next era, his brother Caliph, or himself, was not sure. Huzur saying, I think I made a mistake. Huzur is saying so then they suddenly say that the other people would come and they would say that there was a mistake and those people should be killed, those who had killed others and who had burnt others, and then there were commands that they should be murdered. Is this the Sharia? What kind of justice is this? So by making the excuse of kitab or the word wasiya or application, no one should assume the rights of Godhead. Wherever he does that, then he will be an enemy of God, and he will be removing the Sharia law, and the main message, that is to establish justice, they would have ignored that. Huzur is saying that there are some examples with respect of this which Huzur would like to present. Yesterday we were speaking about wasiyat. Huzur is saying that, let me tell you, make you understand that قُلْ تَعَالَوْا مَا حَرَّمَ Huzur read the Arabic of a verse, and the translation is that, come and I will tell you what your Lord has made haram for you. Allah tushriku bihi shay'an, that you should not hold any equals. وَلِلْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا, and it doesn't mean that you should make it. It has been made haram to show favor to parents. This has been made an obligation that you should be kind to parents. Huzur is saying that I'll explain it further to you. A separate the Quran translation class, I've explained it. وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا أَوْلَادَكُم مِّنْ إِمْلَاقٍ, and do not kill your children because of fear of food, of feeding them. نَرْزُقُكُمْ وَإِيَّاكُمْ, we feeding them and them as well. Huzur is carrying on with the verse, and do not go near obligations, and do not kill anyone whose killing has been made haram, except if someone has a right. Sorry, this was my own translation. I was saying the word maharrama. It has been made clearer what harrama means here, that where Allah has given the right, there's the permission. Sorry, ذَلِكُمْ وَصْفَاكُمْ بِهِ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ, and this is what Allah, this is the wasiyat that Allah does. Huzur is saying, so the word wasa is rules over this whole everything in this everything in this verse is ruled by this word wasiya. So Huzur is saying, for example, when he says that you should treat your parents well, how could you enforce that? So Allah is saying that do not have partners with Allah, and you must be kind to parents, and the other subjects come under them. And apart from the word murder, other than that, none of them anyone has any right over. Huzur is saying that yesterday perhaps I gave the impression that no such matters come under the word wasiya that people have the right to enforce. But I should have made it clear that where Allah has separately given the right of interference, then such matters are also mentioned under the word wasa, and everything that is in the Holy Quran is obviously under the kitab anyway. Mal al yatim, to eat the mal al usurp, the rights of the money of the orphans, they are also included in this, and man has not, no one has given the right to interfere in that either. That is not something that the society can enforce. That happens in the homes, in day-to-day homes. لا نكلف نفس إلا وسعها وإذا قلتم فاعدلوا ولا كان ذا قربى. Who is saying that this is Sorry, I was speaking to Javed sir. They were saying there are two verses which again the word wasiyat is used. وَإِذَا ظَلَمُوا فَعْدِلُوا وَلَوْ كَانُوا ذَا قُرْبَى وَلِعَهْدِ اللَّهِ أَوْفُوا ذَلِكُمْ وَصَّاكُمْ بِهِ. When you speak something, speak with justice. وَلَوْ كُنَّا ذَا قُرْبَى, whether it is you have to make a decision against your close near ones. Huzur is saying even in this as well, it is something which one cannot enforce. For bi'ahdillahi awfu, and you must fulfill the right of Allah. Azalikum wasaakum bihi la'allakum tazakkarun. This has been enjoined upon you. This is what Allah has done wasiyat, or He has commanded you, so that you can understand. Wa anna hadha sirati mustaqima, and this Allah has written. This is a basic of wasiyat, that you should adopt this straight path, fattabi'u, and you should follow in it. وَلَا تَتَّبِعُوا السُّبُلَ فَتَفَرَّقَ بِكُمْ عَنْ سَبِيلِهِ ذَلِكُمْ وَصَّاكُمْ بِهِ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. So the acting of the whole book is comes under the word wasiyat. Anna haza firati mustaqima. This is the right path, the straight path. And about this, the commands that have been issued under the word kitab, but Allah has given the advice that people should follow them, but many of them are such that if you don't act upon them, then sometimes has kept the right of punishment in this world or in the next world or in both worlds in his own hand. Huzur is saying today you're going to spend all the time on Kataba alone. Those verses have been taken out which uses the word Kataba in it, so that it becomes even clearer. And because we are speaking about the word wasiya in detail and also about the word ahkam in detail, so for the sake of the education and the training of the Jamaat, if some extra things are mentioned which do not have directly to do with this verse but could also have to do with other verses, then the subject is such which influences everything. The word kitab and wasiyat, it has been proven that it has to do with all the verses. So there won't be any problem if we understand it better. Now we shall turn towards the dictionary meaning of kataba. Kataba means to write. Yaktubu katban wa kitaban wa kitabatan. Kitabat al-kitab. Khattahu, to write anything. Kattabahu, to teach someone to write. Kadab al-khirbata, shaddaha bil-wiqa, to tie the neck of a sheepskin water container. I was reading some more Arabic, which is that Allah decided for something, Allah made something obligatory and compulsory. Kutub al-Qasiyam is given as an example. Katab al-Kataiba wahabbaha katibatan. He prepared the parts of a book separately. That means that he collected together some different pages in order to make a book. Kattabu, tajamma'u, takattaru, tajamma'u. This means that the army has gathered together. Jash got together. That is the same word is used for armies as well. That armies gathered together in one place, and this word the katabu is used. And al-kitab wa suhufu, such writings which are collected together, and a letter is also called kitab. The Quran, the Gospels, the Bible, all of them are called al-kitab, the book. And death, and for death and for an era, the word ajal is used, and this is also included in the word kitab, because this era or is and death are something that are written, and Al-Qadr is the destiny as well, is also called Kitab. And Iktataba Batnuhu, that his stomach stop, that means it doesn't work. And also for that also the word Iktataba is used. They were saying, how did this happen? They're saying that this is a particular form of grammar. If something goes back on itself, then it's similar to this. They're saying when if it may mean that the stomach went back on itself. Al-Kitabu kullu kitabi yutaqudu anhu. This is something which was in the dictionaries. Huzur's is mentioning a verse where qisas has been made obligatory under the word kitab, and this verse is such which Huzur Singh perhaps have mentioned it before during this verse. There's no need to go into the details of this because it's been mentioned in the early verses. We discussed as to what qasas was and what it means. كتب عليكم إذا حضر أحدكم الموت إن تركوا خيرا الوصية بالوالدين. This is the verse which is often quoted by jurisprudence scholars, and also commentators have mentioned it, and they pick this subject up and they keep it in comparison with the word wasiya, and they try to find out what the importance of it is. And as far as obligation is concerned, it is certain from this word kutiba that iza hazara ahadukumul mautu, that it is incumbent on you that if someone of you has a death in taraka khairan, if he is about to leave some money behind, so it means that his wealth should be such which should be worthy of being left. Then wasiyatul walidaini, after the wasiyat is meant to be done for the close people who are close by, etc. And this is a certainty for the righteous people. I didn't catch all the translation of this verse. So he's saying that when Allah has set a wasiyat, so then what does this verse mean? That wasiyat is obligatory. And in this discussion, the commentators and jurisprudence scholars have taken up very long subjects, and some have picked up the question of abrogation. They say that the detailed verse of about with regards to wasiyat has abrogated this verse because this was read earlier. So I'm saying in this regard, I have said before that there is no abrogated verse in the Holy Quran whatsoever, and this verse has been revealed before this verse. So just as this side of the Holy Quran, that it opens some certain points, it opens slowly and gradually, and it gives the society the chance to accept those things, and when they are completely ready mentally, then a more detailed teaching is given to them. So this was a general preparation which had come before the coming of this prophet, and the word maruf tells us that until that verse was revealed, it was on people were only dependent on maruf, but is this the next, has the coming teachings made this abrogated or cancelled? They're saying, I don't think there is no need for it. They're saying that he thinks that there is need for it, but because this verse can adopt different meanings according to what the situation is. So before that verse was revealed, then it would mean that maruf is what is known, and the customs, the good things that people find out, that they should act in accordance with those. And when this verse will be revealed, then bil maruf will mean that keep the subject of that verse in view, and that is what is maruf, and do your wasiyat or will in accordance to it. And why should you do wasiyat? Because that will in itself cannot be applicable everywhere, and some people can do a wasiyat against a wasiyat, and this verse says that if this happens, then it will be their sin on them, and the question will arise that does the society have the right to enforce that wasiyat or not? But as far as the Holy Quran describes this subject, I'm saying that personally I think that the society has not been given the right to force the change in the wasiyat. But if there is a law of will where it has been accepted in a particular country, then the one whose rights have been usurped, it's up to him to go to the qaza or to the nizam to the jamaat and present their matter and try to acquire his right, because you have accepted this right about everyone. Therefore, because this is not being acted upon in a particular place, so it should be acted upon. As we're saying, this is another aspect. There is no contradiction here, but there are many countries where people will have to the wasiyat will have to be done. So Allah is saying that be righteous and don't think that you can have a free reign. You should be afraid of Allah, because if in that case after Allah's teachings have become clear and they've become a part of the society, but even if the custom is not well established, but the religion is, the law is well established, and so you should then be afraid of Allah. Kutub alaikum as-siyam, we've already spoken about in Siyam, the word kutub is being used, but man has not the right to punish anyone if they don't fast. Kutub alaikum qitalu wa huwa kurhul lakum. Qital is enforced, one is obliged to do it. Huzur is saying that although this is, it says it here that although in history some Muslims have not performed the obligation of fighting, and the Holy Prophet ﷺ did not, for example, punish them by taking away their wealth or anything like that. What is mentioned in the Holy Quran, it very clearly shows that the Holy Prophet ﷺ expressed a social, he puts a social pressure on them. He did not speak to them, but their basic human rights were not taken away from them, and they had their own wealth. They were allowed to live in their own homes. They weren't told to be ousted, to get out of their homes or anything. So, in spite of the fact that there is qital, that is fighting, everyone has the right to. He can make a wrong decision. It's up to him. It's his choice, and it's not that the decision. The decision should be such which is against the Holy Quran, and he is permitted to make a decision in that like that. There is a right of decision, but if he makes a wrong decision, then the wrong decision is in the sense that that decision will not be right in the eyes of Allah, and he will be punishable. So in that regard, he has the right. That means that he'll be deciding against himself, and people will not be free to interfere. وَهُوَ كُرْهٌ لَكُمْ shows that qital was something, fighting was something which people would naturally not dislike it, but despite those excuses there, the society does not have the right to go into people's hearts and make decisions, try to judge what's within people's hearts. So therefore, the Holy Prophet ﷺ had for the three people who made a mistake and who were very high, who were very good in sincerity. The Holy Prophet ﷺ decided that they were punished by no one speaking to them, and but the ones who lied, they were not punished. So this is the Holy Quran that had been revealed to the Holy Prophet ﷺ, that had gone deep into his soul. So so no Maulvi has a right to do anything other than what the Holy Prophet ﷺ did. Although he knew that they were liars, but he did not think that I can read people's minds and therefore I'm going to punish them. Although he could see what was in their minds, he could tell what was in their minds, but he still did not make a decision against them based on that. He decided against them based on what they said. Huzur is saying that it's been he said, the Prophet of the time said to his people, this is a verse of the Holy Quran, or a general said to his people that, is it possible that if the fighting becomes obligatory, their Prophet said it to them, Ubbas lana malika, after Moses, his people asked a prophet that appoint a king for us so we can perform jihad in the path of Allah, and he said that, is it not possible that the jihad becomes obligatory and you do not perform it? They said, no, of course not. قالوا ما لنا. He said, why would we haven't gone crazy, why should we not fight in Allah's cause? And then another subject arises here, that those people who had applied to do jihad, they did not think of any forcible jihad. It's the basic any offensive jihad. They'd been ousted from their homes, and the words of Surah Al-Hijr applied to them. That means that they had been ousted from their homes first, and their children were taken away from them, and they had been made to get out from their homes, and still they were not permitted to do jihad until Allah had appointed for them a leader. And from this aspect this is correct, but so they were only permitted to fight a defensive war. So there were some of them who just spoke words from their mouth, and they did not understand what was entailed, what real jihad entailed. So after it was obligatory upon them, they did not do it, despite the fact that previously they were asked, but they did not perform jihad. So the jihad had practically become obligatory, but that right was not used. So from the obligation, sometimes other verses also they're also found which shows a permission. The Holy Prophet ﷺ and his companions, when they were ousted from their homes for 13 years, they could have done jihad, because according to the rights of justice, he could have done jihad until Allah clearly gave him the command and gave him the permission to fight. And up to that time, he was not allowed to do jihad. And if it is regarded that uzla means that now it is a command and you must fight, then the Holy Prophet ﷺ should have immediately gone and attacked Mecca, because it was he was the one who obeyed Allah in the best way. And So he did not think that Uzila meant that he could now attack Mecca and start killing. He understood it to mean permission, that if now the enemy commits excesses against you, then you were allowed to respond. So when the Meccans committed excesses, then they fought back, and again the same thing happened. So the word kitab is this. All of this comes under the word kitab, and it is not. It doesn't mean. It doesn't refer to that obligation that people normally take it to mean. I was reading another verse. That those people on whom Allah has made it obligatory to fight, they will leave their homes and their beds, and they will go to those places, those fields of battle, where their dying and their fighting is ordained. So here it means destiny. It doesn't mean that it's obligatory upon people that they should run from their beds and go to those places where they're going to be killed. It does not mean that. فَلَمَّا كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْقِتَالُ. So reading the rest of the verse. Here again Huzur is saying it's the same subject, that they were afraid and they stopped themselves, but they weren't killed. And after this, the words are وَاسْتَفْتُونَكَ فِي النِّسَاءِ. Huzur is reading the verse. Huzur is saying here again the word kutiba is used with great strength, but about such matters where Allah is saying that despite this kitabat, despite this instruction, you are not doing something which Allah has commanded, and you are moving away from it, but Allah has not set any punishment to enforce which the Holy Prophet ﷺ's companions would have been given some kind of a command, and this was the occasion which has to do with Surah Nisa. And Huzur is saying it's verse 128, and when we get to it, then we shall discuss it there in Surah Tawbah. Illa kutiba lahum bihi amalun salihun. I think Huzur said it. Kutiba there means such writing which Allah has written upon Himself. That is, Allah has made it an obligation that I will definitely reward such people who go to such places, who walk to such places where they're walking. Even when they walk, others look at them. That people look at them with disdain, and they treat them with extreme extreme hatred. Allah says that every step that they take in that place, Allah will definitely reward them. Another verse Huzur is reciting. Huzur saying, let me see what tawallahu is. Tawalla means friendship. It means there's some people who have been mentioned in the previous verse, who used to speak wrong words about the Holy Quran. Huzur saying this has been taken from another chapter, so Huzur doesn't know what is around this verse, but in any case, what this is for certain, that it refers to a person who Allah does not like, and who is an enemy of Islam. Allah says that this was an obligation upon Allah, kutiba alayhim, I think, that the one who makes friends with someone, yuzilluhu wa yahdihi ila azab as-sa'ir, then Allah will regard him as a misguided person, and Allah will take him towards the fire of hell. The meaning of kutiba, Huzur is saying that I told you that one of the meanings is permission. Huzur is saying that after this I shall finish this discussion and I'll return to the verse. Allah says, Huzur is reading the verse, that Huzur is reading that Allah has said that the relationships that Allah has given you permission for in Ramadan, in normal days in Ramadan, they are still that can be continued. That you are committing excesses against yourself when you, if you stop yourselves from maintaining the relationship between a husband and wife, and you think that it's that you should be a priest in the month of Ramadan. This is wrong. Allah is saying that it is halal, except for the time of fasting. Apart from that time of fasting, you can spend the normal time in the normal life. You can return to normal life afterwards, and you can establish any kind of relationships. Who's reading the rest of the verse? And now you can do whatever you like. You should treat them well, your wives, and whatever Allah has written and made it an obligation. Now, Kataballahu here means that you cannot take it to mean that it has become an obligation on any anyone who any married married couple, that in the month of Ramadan they have to have a relationship. It does not mean that. It means that the normal permission that you had, it's just a permission, that the kitab refers to permission, that which has been made halal. With respect to the kitab, it has do not make it haram. So the Huzur saying the kitab has got very vast meanings, and sometimes the word kitab and the meanings of the word kitab and wasiya becomes the same. I was reading another verse. Huzur saying this is the title. I told you that to give the share of two girls to a son. Huzur is saying that I had said about this, that with the zakara, I said that it doesn't refer to adult males and adult females. Sometimes it is used for adults, and perhaps it's used about them, mostly about adult girls and adult girls and boys, but it is also used for children who are not yet reached adulthood, and the dictionary agrees with this meaning. In the Lisan Arab it says that a male child, he will be called a rajul from as soon as he is given birth by his mother, and until he remains he will be called rajul. So although some say about adulthood that it is known that he will be called a rajul, who is rajul is when someone is over the age of ghulam. This is the general definition. I'm not sure what ghulam means here. The word rajul has been used for children as well, and it's been used for men and women. So the people in the dictionary, people who write dictionaries, they are forced to admit that a person can be called rajul when from the moment he is born. And al-mawjul wasit has given that meaning of rajul, which I have explained before. That means someone who is a brave man or an adult man. Therefore, so we're saying that we do not need to discuss this any further. We're saying I've proven from Quranic verses, and now I shall prove it to you further from dictionaries. So therefore, if we're saying we've discussed this already, when kanat wahidatan falahan nisfu, this is verse 12. But if there be females only numbering more than 2, then they shall have 2/3 of what the deceased leave. And if there be one, she shall have half, and his parents, each of them 1/6 of the inheritance if he have a child. Huzur is saying that the girl has also been called as a walad here, so it means that if they have children, if they're not, if they're not, if walad means only boys, then this verse cannot apply in any case, because in that case another law shall come into play, that of 1 and 2. Here it says وَلِأَبَوَيْهِ لِكُلِّ وَاحِدٍ مِّنْهُمَا السُّدُسُ مِمَّا تَرَكَ إِنْ كَانَ لَهُ وَلَدٌ. For both there shall be a sixth portion. This discussion of the sixth, I wish to present before you that the Holy Quran has given it this title, أَيُوصِيكُمُ اللَّهُ فِي أَوْلَادِكُمْ لِلذَّكَرِ مِثْلُ حَظِّ الْأُنثَيَيْنِ لِهَذِّ مِثْلُ حَظِّ الْأُنثَيَيْنِ. This subject, the people have made this a general title for any division, but this verse is also connected to this fi awladikum. So if this is ignored, then this general title cannot apply everywhere. That means that apparently this is a general application, but because of the awladikum condition, it is an extra thing, and it often it will definitely apply for children, and in other places is not essential. And this, if you take it to mean this, then the last part of this verse is understood, and you can see the connection between the two parts. So if this is kept as the title, this title will have to be accepted in terms of the children. But apart from those, the other people who have been given independently, who've been given twice as much, but then to think that in every division of inheritance, a woman will get twice, and one share, and the male will get twice share. This is not correct, because it says here that for their parents who have left these children, for each of them there is a sixth. So he's saying that I have explained this before, that if there are girls more than two or more than two, then there's 1/3 that is left, which is going to be distributed equally. And if this is not the case, then this verse tells us that the discussion of 1 and 2 will be raised later on. First, the parents' sixth share. Each of them, we should accept that they each shall have a sixth share. And if you do not accept this, then they will get nothing. So whatever is left, they should be distributed with a ratio of 2 and 1. Because where this share has been specified, then you cannot make a change. This can have different meanings in different ways. So in order to make this make you understand this, Huzur is saying I shall have to explain this further, because some people appear to be going to sleep right now. So Huzur is saying that I shall have to make my rate as the same rate as at which people are understanding it. What is meant is that, say for example, a person has 1 son and 2 daughters. How will you give them their shares? The son will be given 1 share, and so there'll be 4 portions. One will be 2. So and the 4 will be distributed among the 3. So we're saying, for example, if there's 8,000, then each will have 2,000, and of that 2 parts will be given to the boy. So he'll get 4,000. If he'll get so he'll get twice. So he'll give out, if 4,000 will be given to the son, and the rest will be given 2,000 each to the 2. This the daughters, if there are 4 of them and the son is 1, then it won't be the same amount. Then it will change. Therefore, this division in different times will change. A different circumstances, the 8 will remain 8, but they will not get a 6th, nor a 10th, nor a 7th, nor any. No, because as far as the amount is concerned, you can't call it the 7th or the 6th or 9th, etc. If the number of inheritors increase, then this will change, but the 6th will remain the 6th, because so the mother will definitely get a 6th, and the father will also will definitely get a 6th. So from this regard, their 6th cannot be touched. So the 6th will be taken out first from the entire amount. 1/3 shall be taken out. So for children, it is 1 and 2. The ratio is 1 and 2, but not for the parents. So this makes it very clear that verse, to say that this verse means that this law is going to apply at every inheritance, is wrong. It will definitely be for the sake of the children, but not for the sake of the others and of the children as well. People have disagreed. They say that where the grandchildren begin, then this 1 and 2 ratio breaks down, because children means children who are inheritors, and according to the Holy Quran, the grandchildren are not in the list of inheritors. So here the children just means sons and daughters, and about them there is this principle, and the parents get a 6th. So he's saying that why should they get a 6th when they have got their own inheritances, and they had 1 and 2 ratio? So why are they each getting equal share, a 6th each? There is a reason for this, that the parents, whoever of them dies, they will return it to the children. Therefore, as far as the rights of the children are concerned, there is no difference. When the mother dies, it will be distributed among the children. If the father dies as well, it will be distributed equally among the children. And their lives, and a child who is dying with inheritance, it obviously says that his parents must have lived a long life, and they have fulfilled their responsibilities, and it may well be that the children may be supporting them. So for them, it's not the same condition, just as it was the father's responsibility to look after the family. Therefore, the father should be given twice the share. So now they're looking after them. The age of them their being looked after is gone. So why make a distinction? Let them give them the same. Let the mother and the father spend what they like, because the real soul of the 1 and 2, most of that time, that was to do with the taking care of the children and performing the marital responsibilities, and it was for the father's responsibilities as a father. But if he's already done performed his responsibility, then that doesn't apply anymore. Old parents do not look after their children. So saying, although some people do, like just as so that may Allah have mercy on such children. But when the scenario that the Quran has painted before us, it means that these are the things that we can discern from it, that it is not the time for you to be a burden on your parents anymore, and you should serve them now, and you shouldn't hang again from their necks. Then Allah says, فَإِن لَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ وَلَدٌ وَوَرِثَهُ أَبَوَاهُ فَلِأُمِّهِ الثُّلُثُ. But if he have no child and his parents be his heirs, then his mother shall have a third. Here the word sulus is mentioned, but the father is not mentioned. If there is no son, فَوَرِثَهُ أَبَوَاهُ فَلِأُمِّهِ الثُّلُثُ. So we're saying this is a very fine and delicate point, and it should be very well understood. There it was, why not 1/3 there? Why say that ratio of 1 and 2 has begun again? And the reason for this is that if there are no children, then they both of them, whatever they get, they will return to their brothers and sisters and not to the children. And if they return to them, then in the day-to-day in earning, the husband will have more than the wife. And if it is made this, if it is equal, then there will be a hidden injustice, whether it's with the parents, that mostly the father is the one who earns, who works hard to earn, and from the father it's been just distributed equally, whereas it couldn't have returned to the parents, it could have returned to their own relatives. That is, if the mother dies, then her brother-in-law shall not get the share. Her brother will get it, about whom there's a separate relationship. So therefore Allah has mentioned the one here, and it says لَذَكَرِ مِثْلُ هَذِّ الْأُنْثَيَيْنِ. Allah has rejuvenated that and reapplied that here. And in such a case, the rest of the 2/3 shall belong to the father. فَإِنْ كَانَ لَهُ إِخْوَةٌ فَلِأُمِّهِ السُّدُسُ. And if he have brothers and sisters, then his mother shall have a 1/6. مِنْ بَعْدِ وَصِيَّةٍ يُوصِي بِهَا أَوْ دَيْنٍ. Then his mother shall have a 1/6 after the payment of any bequests he may have bequeathed or of debts. If the person dying has brothers, so we're saying that if there is no true inheritors, then the brothers are given it. But if this is correct, that the father's brothers' rights are going to be maintained, then the 1 and 2 ratio is being upheld. Then the one who is dying can also have brothers, can also have, if he doesn't have sons, he can have brothers. So it's important to mention them as well, and they are being mentioned. When كَانَ لَهُ إِخْوَةٌ, if he have brothers, then the mothers will not get a 1/3, then she'll get a 1/6. And in this regard, the rights of the brothers comes in between, and this is called hijab, which means veil. And to what extent this hijab is, this is been discussed by the ulama, and when we go into the details discussions, then I'll bring them before you. But in all of those arguments, when you look at them and when you read, one thing is certain, that in the inheritance, different people, different eras, ulamas of different eras and of different sects, they have abandoned the principles, and they have moved away from the main teachings, and they have derived from certain matters, from certain traditions, and then from them further derivations, and the further derivations have been made, and it has made such a difference between the main basic teachings that it seems as if there is no Sharia law. And there are, in fact, there's many different Sharias, and basically do whatever you want. If this is legitimate, then that is also legitimate, and if this is haram, that's also haram. So the whole matter has been thrown into complete confusion. And because this is very dangerous, that instead of remaining stuck to the Holy Quran, and instead of understanding the Holy Quran and reflecting upon it and gaining guidance from it, if one leaves this attempt, and rather than doing that, if people rely on customs or on the decisions of previous ulama, then there's a definite danger that they will be misguided. And this is exactly what's happened. As I was saying, when I read references, you'll understand how many differences are in such matters. So I was saying, now we should return towards this verse. فَإِنْ كَانَ لَهُ إِخْوَةٌ فَلِأُمِّهِ السُّدُسُ مِنْ بَعْدِ وَصِيَّةٍ يُوصِي بِهَا أَوْ دَيْنٍ. So if she doesn't have sons and has if he have no child and his parents be his heirs, then his mother shall have a 1/3, and if he have brothers and sisters, then his mother shall have a 1/6 after the payment of any bequests he may have bequeathed or of debts. He's saying that will it be 2/3? This ulama have taken up from themselves as well, these discussions, the father's right has not been mentioned before and not been mentioned here as well, which means that that is a right which is an established right. And if it's with respect to the ratio of 1 and 2, then 2/3 will definitely be given to the father. If there are brothers and there are father and mother as well, then the mother will get a sixth, and then the father, if he gets sulus, then the 1 and 2 ratio remains. If he gets is going to get 2/3, then that right is not there, I think Huzur said. So the apparent derivation is that by setting the mother's share, we have permitted that the father's portion should be guessed at, but some have disagreed with this, and I'll tell you about that later on. Abaukum wa abnaukum la tadruna ayyuhum aqrabu lakum nafa. This is what I've already explained. Huzur said that as far as I'm concerned, this is proven from the previous verse that the real wasiyat, that the real soul behind wasiyat is which affects those relationships which the fathers have with their children, and the children will have with their fathers. So the family whose responsibility of their care is in the father's hand, and if the parents cannot look after themselves, then it is an obligation on the children to take care of their parents. So inheritance, the soul of it means to rely on each other, and the people afterwards, they only come into a focus when these relations are not present, or they may be present but they still demand some mercy, and Allah may have has given some portions for them, so then voluntarily some money can be given to them. So this is the crux of the matter. Zuri is saying that this is the last thing Allah has said agrees with this. Abaukum wa abnaukum la tadruna ayyuhum aqrabu lakum nafa. Your fathers and your children, that you do not know who is better for you, who is more, who can die first and who can die later. Will you remain alive, or your children may die, or you remain alive and your parents die, or you die, and you don't get the share of them or them, then these matters are in the hands of Allah. But as far as relations are concerned, the benefits have been associated with each other. Faridatum min Allah. This is an obligation from Allah, in the Allah kana aliman hakima, and Allah is surely Allah is all-knowing and wise. Huzur is saying that I keep looking up, but if there's only 2 or 3 minutes left, please let me know. For wasiyat, about wasiyat or will, the books of traditions, dictionaries are saying that Isaun is wasiyat, is from Isaun, and sometimes wasiyat is being the thing that is being willed is also called wasiyat. So the actual wealth is also called wasiyat, as assets are also called it. That means that thing which is that this is the will of this thing which is being willed. And wasaila, such matters, such actions which we have been set as obligation upon man, such as the respect of parents. Danun, dana yadino, danun means loan, and if you say dana, if you use the word dana, then it means that someone gave someone a loan, or took a loan from someone. And if the ifal tense is used, then it changes this, and it means that to give a loan. So let me read each word now. I was reading some Arabic that say, I gave Dintu,
दाना का मतलब
I gave someone something. Sorry, I took
अगर कहा
a
जाए
loan from someone. So dana means to take a loan.
अदन तो
And if it is said
मैंने
that adantu,
अदना दान का
I
इस बाब इफाल में
I
ढाला जाए तो अदन तो कहेंगे तो
Huzur say Huzur is using the Arabic words in order to express the tense and the grammar of a word.
अदन तो मैंने
Huzur saying is adan salasi mujarrad, which means I took. Adantu means I took a loan from him, and adantu I think Huzur said means I gave him a loan.
मदीन
Abu Beda has taken this to mean this. Madin or Madyun is someone who is in debt. But dintuhu, I took a loan from him.
दिनतू की तरह ही
Adantu. Some people say that it's like dintu.
मशहूर अबू
That means that
ये फर्क कर रहे हैं
some people,
अदाना भी कहा जाए
writers of dictionaries, Abu Ubaidah is making this distinction, but some people say that even if you say Adana, then it actually means the same thing as Dantu. It is not much difference.
ये बाकी दाना ये दिनों की बहस है
I'm saying the rest.
मैं
Dana Yadino, this is a discussion of this. What he's saying is just these are the final points of dictionary which we do not need to go into details of. The what is important for you to understand we've already mentioned.
कहते हैं
For instance, if somebody said Dana Flanun, then that somebody
कौन सी अरबियां बोल
who asks for a loan, then the same is used. Zul is saying that you're not going to speak Arabic, so forget about this. Where wasiyat is mentioned, where we need to know about what it means with reference to wasiyat, I'll explain it to you. Zul is saying everyone knows the word nafa, benefit, and
उर्दू में बड़ी कसरत से
you must know what this word means, and everyone knows what fariza is. So saying this is used in Urdu as well. It means an obligation or something that is a must and which is very important, and which something which is which one must do. So fariza is an ordinary word, and it is used in every language in the same kind of meaning. But some specific Arabic usages there is some specific Arabic usages which are not common in other languages. There is also the word for old animals. Who's saying I don't know why it became a fariza. So he's saying that perhaps to slaughter it is essential, and that's why it's called a fariza. Al-faraz wa sunnatu. That means faraz means such a sunnah of the Holy Prophet ﷺ which is proven beyond doubt. About wasiyat and about its knowledge, the Holy Prophet ﷺ has explained 3 types of knowledge which our Mufradab Imam Raghib has explained, which are that there are 3 types of knowledge. One of them is to distribute with justice, that is to understand the wasiyat and to distribute with justice. This is ilm, but al-ilmu ilman is also a tradition, so in different ways this distribution has been done. One is that there are 2 types of knowledge, either that of religion or that of the laws of nature. Abdan does not just mean bodies or the knowledge of medicine. It means the material versus the religion. Sorry, the knowledge of religion. So these are the only 2 main types of knowledge. The rest are just and the arts, etc., have not really got much much importance. So those are all auxiliary matters. The real knowledge is that of religion or of laws of nature. So we're saying there's one thing which refers to if there's more than 2 daughters, how will the inheritance be spread, will be distributed, and will anyone else will share in that? So to saying from this verse, from this tradition, the derivations that have been made, the ulama disagree with that, but I'll present that tradition before you in completion. Al-Jabir bin Abdullah relates that a woman who had 2 daughters came to the Holy Prophet ﷺ, and she said that, O Prophet of Allah, these 2 daughters are Sabit bin Qais's daughters, or he said that either they are Sa'd bin Rabi's daughters, who was with you in the Battle of Uhud and who passed away. Who said this is the same reference which Rodwell has raised, and he said that the martyred people, they're different in different traditions. In fact, there are 6 different names, so from which we can also ascertain that they may not be authentic. So he says that his idea, he is that because more than one companion passed away in the Battle of Uhud, in fact 70 passed away, and of them 6 of them could have had only daughters and 1 son. So she could have been it could have been that each one of those wives came and mentioned their husband. So this has been repeated here, that either she said Ibn Qais or Sa'd bin Rabi, maybe both of theirs, the widows had come, but both. The next bit says that in this account, in any case, 2 separate women are not. It's not possible that 2 separate women are mentioned because their uncles had taken over their wealths. So saying it's still possible that both could have the same could have been happened to both of them. That according to the Arab custom, they might have thought that the person who has passed away, everything that is his belongs to us. And he said that what about these children, these girls? And then they say that Surah Nisa, which was about to be revealed, was being revealed. This verse was revealed. Yusikumullahu, that Allah this verse that Huzur is saying that this verse was revealed, Yusikumullahu fi awladikum, and he said that, I was told by the Holy Prophet ﷺ to call the woman and the person who has claimed over her wealth, or upon whom she has made a claim, call him as well. And she told the uncle to come and give them 2/3. The Holy Prophet ﷺ made a decision that these 2 girls shall have 2/3, and then gave the mother an 1/8, and whatever is left, that will be given to the brother. So the 1/8, it will be given. It will be out of the 1/3. So if the mother does not, there's no mother and there is no brothers, then where should that go? Or if there is no mother and there are brothers, then will the brothers get it, or will they get it back? So after this, then jurisprudence scholars have had differences of opinion. As I was saying, is it 1 minute or 2 minutes left? Allama Razi has raised this issue that what was the custom in the Arabs, as who they used to give inheritance to. He was saying these are matters which do not require us to go into detail. As far as the background is concerned, in order to understand Islamic laws, it's the ulama's, up to the ulamas to understand this. The Holy Prophet ﷺ's distribution of inheritance is a separate subject, and Huzur saying I've got that ready separately, and right now Huzur says I'll leave that for now. That if these were commands of the Sharia and everybody was obliged to follow them, then Holy Prophet ﷺ wasn't given a special permission. Then despite that, his inheritance, why was that not distributed according to the rules of the Sharia? And why did the Holy Prophet ﷺ himself not stop? Why did he himself stop it, and why did he give all of it to sadaqah, to charity? These are the issues which will be raised separately and discussed separately, inshallah. The next arguments, they're saying there's no time for them because there is a lot of time has been spent on the word of Kitabat. From tomorrow we shall take up this issue again, and we shall present those matters which have been left of this issue. You're saying that that's what I mean. You're saying that you can be a good jurisprudence, a scholar. You're saying when I said tomorrow, I meant whenever we meet next. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.